So yeah, with that said, why don't we go ahead and hear from Rabbi?
Oh, okay. Thank you. First of all, this has been an awesome opportunity. I definitely love talking about Judaism and Alaska to anyone who's willing to listen. So I appreciate Leah getting a hold of me and asking to do this. So I guess welcome to Alaska on your world tour. I'm told you've gone some other places, and I'm really glad that Alaska is a spot for y'all. So yeah, I'm part of Congregation Beth Shalom. We are the oldest and biggest congregation in Alaska. We've been around since, I believe, 1958 is when we started. Obviously, I wasn't around then, but Joe in Virginia might have been. Then we got our current building that we have now. We've been lived there since 1988. And so we've been doing pretty good. We have about 150 families, give or take, for our congregation. So we're actually considered to be a pretty small congregation in sort of like the Reformed Jewish world, is what we're affiliated with. But we're in Anchorage itself, we're actually considered a medium-sized congregation, so it's pretty cool. We do a lot of stuff with our community here. And yeah, we call ourselves the Frozen Chosen. Our website is frozenchosen.org. And we're starting to thaw out right now, which has been really great. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions and kind of give you an understanding of sort of the Alaska Jewish experience, and kind of tell you how we deal with that. A big question I get right off the get-go is our light. Like, right now, I think I was up at 3:30 in the morning the other day, and it was already getting light out, and it stays light until maybe about 11 at night, even later at this point. So we get a lot of light in the summer. And so a big question is, how do we deal with Shabbat or Havdalah? And the joke is that 7:30, no matter what happens, is when we have Shabbat, and 7:30, no matter what happens, when we have Havdalah. That's our solution. Because at the night, it's the exact opposite, right? So like the sun's down before 4, it's not back up again until 10:30 or 11, so it's very dark. And so we've just decided it's easier to commit to having just the same time every single week for Shabbat and Havdalah. And that's sort of one of the solutions we've had to figure out, being in a unique place like Alaska. But I'm happy to answer any questions off the get-go if anyone has any, so feel free to ask. But yeah, I just think that like it's such a unique place. And I really, one thing I talk a lot about is how we need Jewish creativity to be in a place like Alaska. I often think of Judaism as being sort of an urban or metropolitan religion, in that it only used to be able to exist in those places, but thanks to ingenuity and sort of Judaism, we're able to be in places like Alaska and have successful and thriving Jewish communities, thanks to, I think, the innovation of Judaism as well. And so, but we have to be creative in order for us to stick, in order to be together, especially in a time like now with COVID-19. And so I really believe in Jewish creativity, and I believe it's the reason why we can have Judaism everywhere. No matter where it is or how isolated it is, Jews can be together and have a community together and worship together in any place. And so Alaska is just one location of all the isolated places where Judaism can happen. And I really believe that. So anyways, so that's kind of like my quick elevator speech that I usually give about Alaska and Judaism. Joe, Virginia, you think I covered it all? Or Joe, by the way, Joe has been not only a state senator, but he's been our congregation's president for a long time as well, and a huge member of our congregation.
Wonderful. So just I just want to mention, I did get some questions.
Sure.
So my question is something we talked about over the phone that I thought was really interesting, is how you travel around the state. And yeah, if you could talk about that.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier there's like maybe 3 Chabad rabbis. There are no conservative rabbis. I'm the only Reform rabbi, and we have a student rabbi that comes in through Juneau once a month. So Alaska's a big state, and there's not a lot of coverage. So I end up finding myself in weird and random places throughout Alaska, because our congregation's mission is that I serve Alaska as much as I serve the congregation here in Anchorage, as much as I can. And so, so if someone passes away in like a random place, I'll have to either drive or fly there, because we don't have roads to all of our towns or villages in Alaska. and in order to kind of get to them. So like I find myself in a lot of unique places that are hard to get to in order to help serve the Jewish community here in Alaska. And so and it's crazy. So sometimes in the middle of winter I had to drive 4 hours to get to a funeral, and then drive another 4.5 hours back or whatever, and it was like in the middle of nowhere. And that's sort of part of my job is to go to where I'm needed in terms of the where a rabbi is needed in this whole state. It's a big state.
Amazing.
I might chime in a little bit. People don't realize that in the gold rush days in Nome, there was an active Jewish community, and there were immigrants from Eastern Russia who came to Nome as a gateway to the United States. One of them was an ancestor of Justice Arthur Goldberg, whose grandson lived in Anchorage for a while and told me about that. And Wyatt Earp, the famous gunslinger, was married, at least common law marriage, to Sadie Marcus, and they lived in Nome during the Gold Rush era and are part of the Nome history that in the early days you wouldn't think about a Jewish presence, but there was Jewish presence even back then. And that interests me. And my father came to Alaska. He was born in Latvia, came to Alaska having never been farther west than Chicago. And he drew me aside and said, if I was a young man, Joe, I would live here in Alaska, which I thought was part of the diaspora experience and very touching to me to hear my dad make that comment.
Yeah, and also we have 3 Torot, all of them having kind of fun Alaskan stories. We have the farthest north Holocaust Torah, or Tattoo Torah, that's been registered. And we have one Torah that actually came in through the Gold Rush and traveled around Nome and through Alaska that finally found its home here at our congregation. So we have like a Gold Rush Torah, if you will. And then our final Torah is like a Torah that some community, and I think it was in Connecticut, Cincinnati, I forget, but someone just realized or saw that we're starting a Jewish community in Alaska, and they bought us one and sent it to us. And so we have all of our Torot are very Alaskan. They have very Alaskan stories, and it's pretty exciting to show those off whenever anyone comes to our congregation.
I do have another question. Can you tell us more about who makes up your congregation and what Jewish resources there are?
Who makes up our congregation? Is that like a demographic question? Who's asking the question?
Here, Nancy.
Yeah, that was me. I was just wondering, like, is it young families? Is it retirees? How do people find you?
Yeah, it's across the board, to be honest. We have like a young families group. We've got a young professionals group, and they're all doing pretty well. We got lots and lots of I would say like religious school family aged people or groups, and then certainly we've got our number of empty nesters as well. And so that, and in terms of Jewish resources, that's where the creativity comes in. We don't have a ton. There is no federation that we get to use or rely on. And so essentially we're a bit on our own up here and so our resources is whatever our community can offer, which can be a lot, and it's great. But we don't have the same resources that y'all have in LA.
What about, and sorry if you already mentioned this, kosher food?
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a lot of congregants here who are vegetarian, only because it's hard to access kosher meat. There is like a once a month kosher meat sort of like thing that happens that some people are part of, but there's no access to really like decent kosher meat here in Alaska, and so it's hard to be kosher here. It's just easier to be vegetarian for many people.
So another question is, who brought Jews to Alaska?
Who brought Jews
to Alaska?
Can you expand on that question? I'm not sure.
Here, Barbara. Hold on.
I think you're on. Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Other than the Russians that you mentioned, why else did Jews presumably come up from the lower 48?
Oh.
What was it, like oil, or what was it that brought the majority of the Jews that are up in Alaska?
I don't know if it's one thing. Maybe after I tackle it, Joe, maybe you can tackle it. But everyone, a lot of people who I talk to, who especially like my age or younger, like, oh, I'm here to clerk for someone else. I'm a lawyer. So I get that a lot. But I'm sure oil brought tons of people. I know that, like, I was raised here, and oil brought my parents to Alaska in part, and so. But I don't think I think there's a diversity of reasons why people come. I often get people who come now who just say that they want to be closer to nature. It's interesting, and so it's not any job that's bringing them here, but just the location. As Leah pointed out, it's a gorgeous place. I want to be near that. Joe, do you have any other thoughts about that?
What?
Well, I mean, there's something that I like to think in the Jewish spirit about attraction to new areas and to areas that can be developed where you can make a difference and create something fresh. In my case, I was fortunate enough to get employed in Washington, D.C. by Alaska's last territorial delegate, who then became United States Senator. And I made my first trip to Alaska to campaign for statehood when we had the referendum for statehood. But there are other people drawn to Alaska, Jewish people, because of the idea of creating a fresh government. We have the oldest living member of our Constitutional Convention is in his 90s now and is a Jewish man, formerly a legislator like me. And the former Chief Justice of our Supreme Court was a Jewish leader, scholar, and the mayor of Anchorage today is Jewish. So there's an attraction, I think, for public service and to create a new place, which is hopefully part of our legacy.
So I have a bunch more questions.
Oh, cool.
Paul, can you go ahead and answer or mention what your question was? I didn't understand.
Yeah. Who handles the Brit Milah for you?
Yeah. So we're in a bit of a transition. So we don't have anyone specifically for that, but we do have a couple of pediatrician doctors who are either currently going through the program or who have gone through the program, and essentially we sort of tag team and help with that together. So we'll go to their doctor's office and they will perform it, and I will say the words. I know that Chabad, actually, they bring someone up every time that they need one. They bring a professional for that. So, but yeah, we actually we have 2 community members who are physicians and who perform the Brit Milahs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so another question is, does the synagogue provide Hebrew school, Sunday school?
Yeah, I'm jack of all trades. I run the religious school, and we have a Sunday program and then a weekday Hebrew program as well. And so it's we've been doing it I don't know, since the 60s, 70s at least. There's been a religious school occurring for Congregation Beth Shalom, and we get, I think we get about 40 families who run through it at any given year. So it actually does quite well. And so yeah, it's been a pretty good program.
He's an alumnus.
Yeah, I know, I went through it. That's pretty funny.
Another question is, how does Chabad deal with Shabbat within the winter and summer?
Yes. I believe they align themselves with Seattle, essentially. So they'll start services whenever services start in Seattle.
Gotcha. So before I turn it over to you, Joe, I just wanted to share a screen real quick of photos of Alaska, just so you can see how incredibly beautiful it is. So I just want to do that real quick. And feel free to, Rabbi or Joe, say anything about what you're seeing.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so can you see it?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty much.
I see what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I didn't even know what to choose.
Let's go.
So, oh my gosh, this is Alaska. And what is this right here? The Abra, I can never pronounce it.
Aurora Borealis. That's Northern Lights.
Amazing. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah, yeah, of course,
Yes.
numerous times.
And it's a big tourist attraction, especially for Asians who come to Fairbanks in the wintertime to see the Aurora Borealis.
Amazing. I don't know if Denali is here, but Denali is one of the biggest parks.
Yeah, it's there. A couple places.
Yeah.
Oh, and we got Seward. I've been to Seward. That's where most cruises go into, correct?
That's what we say.
Is it such a big port?
Go through Seward and Juneau.
There's a railroad that runs from Anchorage to Seward. Many people enjoy that.
Super fun.
And lastly, I just want to do this because it was another magical thing. Wait, I can't see it right now. I just have to show a glacier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just so beautiful.
We got the.
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
But they're receding.
At an alarming rate. Yeah. Really unfortunate. We're losing glaciers.
All right. And then one last thing I'm going to look up. This was another amazing experience with seeing a moose. I'll never forget it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And then let's go ahead and turn it to you, Joe.
Oh, my gosh. I don't have a lot to
I'd love to hear your story. It's pretty incredible in helping to make Alaska a state.
Yes, I was very fortunate, I think, because the man I worked for, who became a US Senator, was a very great person. And his colleague, Ernest Greening, who had been the territorial governor and also in the first legislature, in the first Congress where Alaska was a state, had a Jewish background himself, although he didn't talk about it much. And then later I had other positions working in the Native Claims Settlement Program and being on the commission that made the municipal government's charter and doing other kinds of services like that. So I've been a witness to things for a long, long time. And I was thinking that in 1963, as a young legislator, I offered an amendment to the marriage code, which talked about how marriages could be solemnized by ministers or priests, to add the word rabbi. And that, I just looked it up today, and that language still is in the statute, that now the Alaska Code of Laws recognizes a rabbi as someone who can lawfully perform a marriage. After the House adjourned that day, a colleague of mine who was not Jewish came up very angrily and he said, "Why do you monkey around with that and put that word rabbi in the code? This is serious business. Why were you doing that?" And I said, "You're very lucky." He said, "What do you mean I'm lucky?" He said, "Because the amendment I really had was to strike the word minister and priest and insert rabbi, and then define rabbi to mean rabbi, minister, or priest." So you got off easy, I told him. Anyway, that was in 1963, and attitudes were very different then, I think.
Amazing. And so when did you retire?
Well, I'm not retired. I'm still practicing law, so I'm not retired.
Yes, I did read that.
But I left the legislature, I don't know, in the mid 80s, and my son's a legislator now, as a matter of fact. And indeed, this Jewish issue came up in the legislature this week. A member of the legislature objected to having to wear a badge to get into the Capitol building because of the virus epidemic. And he said, this is like having to wear a Star of David, as the Nazis made Jews wear in the Holocaust. And I resent this. And there was a big uproar about that. And my son was quoted as saying, you're trivializing the Holocaust when you compare having to wear a badge to get into the Capitol building during the virus epidemic to what my people went through in the Holocaust. And so then the original, this man said, a young man in the legislature, he tried to backtrack and apologize. And he said, well, that was wrong, but that was about undesirables, he said. And this makes me feel like an undesirable. And so he just made matters worse and worse and worse. And the whole issue became a story in the Washington Post and the New York Times just 2 or 3 days ago. And they quoted my son as being one of the few Jewish members of the legislature. So it's a constant educational issue, I think, more than it is a mean-spirited discrimination issue. It's an ignorance issue, I think. Do you agree, Rabbi?
Yeah, I just want to point out that almost all of my youth groupers, all of my kids that go to elementary school and middle school, they're all the only Jews in their school, almost all of them. And so so they often they end up being Jewish representatives, even though they don't want to be. They're kind of forced into that role because most Alaskans have zero connection with Jews or Judaism at all. And so I often am talking to the principals, the superintendent, to lots of people in the school district to remind them that we're a religion, and we should, you can't have like running meets on Yom Kippur. That's not okay. And B, to help sort of support these kids who often get, I wouldn't call it like blatant anti-Semitism, but who deal with kids who are very ignorant of Judaism and don't fully understand it, and have to sort of like defend it, even though all they want to do is just, hang out with their friends and get their homework done.
And it comes up also in the framing of the school calendar, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's been a lot of battles there, where the calendars don't necessarily respect all religious holidays when they are and when they overlap, and so we often have to ask them to redo some things because the calendar is inappropriate or incorrect compared to our Jewish practices. So it's been a kind of a complicated problem to navigate, and I always kind of feel bad for our Jewish kids who have to be the sort of representatives, whether they like it or not, as they go through school here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question is, do you have any anti-Semitic attacks up there?
Yeah, so I hate to say this, but because we're the biggest and oldest community, we're kind of a lodestone for anti-Semitism. And so, but every 6 months, something weird or strange happens. We've received bomb threats before. We've received all kinds of threats. So it's bad enough where our doors are locked 100% of the time. We have a key card system for our for all of our members, so it is kind of an unfortunate problem to have to manage. And since we're relatively small, we don't really have or can afford a security force. So we have to use a lot of passive ways to stay protected. And it's a constant conversation too, because I feel like being secure and being welcoming are values that clash often. And when you're way one, you're not the other. And so our community itself, I think, is constantly having and rehaving this conversation, whether we should be either more welcoming or more secure, and what that looks like, and what the sacrifices are for each one.
And the signage outside the building is subtle, I think, too.
Yeah.
It's not easy to find.
Yeah, and we recently received that grant from Homeland Security that allows you to offer more protection, and so we got the grant, and so we now have like 360 cameras and stuff like that. But it's unfortunate. It's not fun to talk about. It's not fun to deal with, but we certainly get it, and we do get it pretty hard.
But my experience was that the FBI has been extremely helpful and appealing to us and friendly
Yeah.
in trying to protect our interests. Yeah.
Yeah. I know almost 4 or 5 members of the FBI by first name now. Also, side note: don't try to send them flowers. They don't like it when you send them packages of things. Yeah, we're very close to the FBI. We're very close to the police department. I'll often get a phone call from someone in the police department just saying, "Hey, just checking in, telling you not heard anything in a while." I'm like, "Good, thanks. It's great to hear." And so we definitely have those relationships.
So Rosanna, will you ask your question? Because expand on it. Here, I'm going to unmute you.
So Rabbi, did you see those problems when you were there growing up, and the difference then and now? Can you talk about that?
I mean, I would argue, yeah, absolutely, and it's probably one of the reasons why I became a rabbi, is because I found myself having to articulate Judaism at such a young age, and so I absolutely had those problems. None of my friends were Jewish growing up, and I had to deal with all kinds of people who thought that I shouldn't be Jewish. So I think it's one of those things that happens, and I believe sort of in a more isolated location, where you're dealing with people who are not anti-Semitic, but who are completely ignorant of Judaism. And so they say things that are inappropriate or hurtful, but they themselves don't see it that way. And it's been the easiest thing to say is like, "Hey, I'm Jewish." And usually when you say that, they instantly say, "Oh, shoot, I didn't know that I knew someone who was Jewish. And now that I do, I feel like I need to be more careful." And so that was like, growing up, it's all that I had to really do. And it got better. I mean, I dealt with some stuff, but really it was just sort of the ignorance of it.
What connection do you have with Indigenous nations religious leaders?
Indigenous?
I guess Native Alaskan? Maybe?
Yeah, well, I was hoping.
And then we have Will. Is Will here?
Have you seen Willie?
I don't see Willie. Well, in my experience, I've served in the legislature with Native leaders, and as chairman of the Land Use Planning Commission, I dealt with representatives like Willie Hensley of Native interests, and as a lawyer, I'm encountering, not always happily, problems with tribal law and tribal governments, but they're increasingly vocal in Alaska. But there's no question that the Native community in Alaska needs help. They're, in terms of homelessness, poverty, alcoholism, and other social issues. The Native Claims Settlement Act gave Native groups revenue from oil, valuable lands actually. And so they have done very well in creating corporations which provide dividends to members and employment to some of their members, and opportunities for leadership and growth among the brighter personnel that they have. But they still have tremendous social problems in their rural communities, in housing, and in especially nowadays with communication difficulties, isolation, made worse by the economy, I think. So it's a struggle all the time to help create a viable presence for the natives, which is self-sufficient and recognizable, and helps them make the most of the opportunities they have.
Do you have a sister congregation in Israel or the 48 states?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't think we do we?
I don't think we have a formal sister relationship. I don't know. I don't think
Great
that
question.
What?
Something, yeah. I don't think we do. We might have, but I'm not sure we have anything right now.
No.
What about how often do the different Jewish communities in Alaska connect? Is there any partnering that happens?
Yeah. We have a program called Shabbaton, And it happens roughly every 2 years, every 3 years, where we literally, in the middle of winter, we go to Girdwood, which is where all the skiing is, and we rent out like a ton of hotel rooms, and we bring in scholars and artists and musicians, and we have kind of this great Alaska programming. It's really easy to get scholars to come to this because they all want to come to Alaska. And so we've gotten some really great, talented people to come and talk and stuff like that. And so, that's a program that we really like, and we run, and it's really fun, and we do a lot of learning. We call it Shabbatone on the slopes.
Nice.
I have a question. I typed it, but it didn't go through. I have two questions. One, is there summer camp? And two, is there any teaching of the Holocaust as part of the Alaska school curriculum?
So we don't have like a overnight summer camp, but we certainly have a summer camp called Camp Shalom through our synagogue throughout the whole summer, and it's really great, a lot of Jewish programming. Though we also have a early education center as well, and that goes that's every business day. And mind you, like hardly any of these kids are Jewish, and hardly any of the teachers are Jewish. So I end up providing all the Jewish curriculum for the early education center and the camp, and then I kind of give teachers Judaism 101, and then they sort of convey it to the kids. We believe that Judaism is a vehicle for multiculturalism, and so we invite any kid to come and enjoy our camp or like the education center, and parents love it. They love their kids learning about Judaism, even though they're not Jewish. And sort of Holocaust, we do. We do some Holocaust memorial, and we actually have a beautiful Holocaust memorial in our building, made by a local artist. But we also have an educational program. It's not as intense as I would like, but we certainly do talk about it, especially on Yom HaShoah, and we have those kind of conversations with the older kids, for sure.
Some of our members do interact with the Board of Education and school administrators to talk about Holocaust issues and curriculum. So there are avenues for input and recommendations and requests.
Okay, so another question is, how much of the state's income is derived from cruise ships? And I'm sure COVID is badly affecting it.
Oh boy, it's been terrible.
Well, our biggest income is oil, of course. Cruise ships definitely is part of it. But yeah, I mean, we're going to hit hard both by oil prices and by lack of tourism. So we'll have to see how we pan out in the next year or so. So for a long while, Alaska was really wealthy, but it's very much tied to crude oil.
Well, the tourism is very badly affected. Last year, I was in Juneau for business, and my son, of course, has a condominium there. When the legislature's in session, and he rents it every summer to actually people who sell jewelry to tourists when they get off the boat. That business is dead now. There are no boats, there are no cruise ships. So it's remarkably bare to go to Juneau now, and there's nothing happening. And our hotels are empty now, and our cruise ships don't come even in this area. And so there's a terrifically marked decline in our economy because of the virus, just on that account alone. And not to speak of airplane travel, because people don't want to come to Alaska and then go to a 2-week quarantine when they get here. And Alaskans don't want to go elsewhere and be quarantined if they get back. And so there's a terrific impact by the virus. Although we don't have many cases here, we have among the least known cases of the disease of the virus. Still, it's affecting our economy very badly.
Okay, so Rebecca and Leonard have a question.
Hi, I thought I'd just share a little tangential connection that I had to Alaska from many years ago. Maybe 30 years ago, I was at a party here in Los Angeles, and I met a guy who turned out to be a rabbi, and he was actually a chaplain in the Air Force who was stationed at Elmendorf Air Force Base outside of Anchorage.
Uh-huh.
And we talked for a while, but one of the things that he told me is that at one point, the base commander called him into his office, and the question he had for him was, why is it that we have to send your wife to Seattle every month? And the answer, of course, is for the mikvah. So he explained this to him, and he said, well, can't we build one of these over here? And he said, well, yes, you can. And to make a long story short, the Air Force actually built a mikvah for his wife on the Air Force Base, and it stood there for maybe 25 years before they took it down because he wasn't there anymore. So I just wondered if that's a story you guys had ever come across.
Oh, I've heard it before. Yeah, I wish the mikvah was still available. That's always a problem when we have conversion candidates.
So I have a question for you, Joe. I read that there is a Jewish Democratic candidate for US Senate in November for Lisa Murkowski's seat.
Yeah.
So do you think being Jewish affects his chances? Will it be an issue in the campaign?
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that because his name is Dr. Gross, and his aunt was my girlfriend in high school in New Jersey many years ago. I don't think being Jewish will affect his chances very much, but I don't think his chances are very good, frankly. He's running against an incumbent. The incumbent
hold on, Joe. Is it Sullivan or is it Murkowski that he's running? I thought
Sullivan.
Murkowski. It's Sullivan. Yeah, I thought Murkowski wasn't up this.
And Sullivan's very well financed, and the state's conservative. I'm hopeful that he can win, but I mean, realistically, I don't think it's going to happen. Plus the fact that he lived most of his life in southeastern Alaska, away from the population area. His father was an attorney general. Av Gross was attorney general of Alaska, very able attorney general for a long time. He would be very qualified and able as a senator. He's also active in the fishery industry as well as medicine. So he brings a lot to the table, but I really doubt that he will make a close race out of it.
It is cool. He was on Forward magazine, though.
Pardon?
Al Gross. Al Gross was on Forward magazine about his run. I thought that was pretty neat.
Well, that's good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So before I ask one of the questions, Paul had a story about a moose that I'd love to hear.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. My sister lived in Anchorage for more than 30 years.
Yeah.
And she had both her kids up there, and she used to tell me that the moose pretty much had the run of the city, and they would show up in people's backyards and waltz down the street. But what I found most interesting was that kids who were in kindergarten at that age are taught how to handle moose if they come upon them. Could you guys elaborate on that, or is moose a big problem still there in the city?
I mean, I have a 3-year-old, and so I'm constantly telling him, make a lot of noise, never surprise the wildlife, and the moose won't bother you. But I mean, I have bears that literally have walked next to my place 2 weeks ago, and so the bears are more scary to me than the moose. The moose, you just keep your distance a little bit. You can actually end up accidentally walking right up to moose, and it's not really a big problem.
She told me that they were really angry and they didn't like people, but okay.
I deal with moose on a semi-regular basis, and I haven't had too many issues with them. They can get angry, for sure, but they're also really hard to see. I mean, it's surprising. They're like these big, brown, awkward creatures, but they blend into the brambles really well.
Camouflage.
There's a lot of moose-related car accidents because they're difficult to see in the road.
They're very present even now, and in fact, we had an event right by my office downtown when the moose came right up to the door and didn't bother anything. We took pictures. They're just in the community, but they're not threatening.
You can leave the door.
All right. So someone wants to know for you, Rabbi, so what do you do when there is a conversion?
Oh,
given?
there's lots of naturally occurring lakes here in Alaska, many of them quite secluded. The only issue is they're very cold. But we don't really have a good solution for mikvahs, unfortunately. So we often go through a gambit of options. We're like, well, we can find a secluded lake for you to hang out in for, a little bit. Or a lot of people, when they're in the lower 48, they just find an opportunity to go to a mikvah then. So yeah, if you want to contribute to our mikvah fund, we're really happy to for the help. I have a congregant who's like a really big backyard with a river that flows through it. And we're like thinking about how to dam the river in a way where it creates it deep enough where we could use that as like our mikvah. And it's pretty close to the congregation. But that's as close as we've gotten so far.
Rabbi, were you joking about your mikvah fund, or are you serious?
I'm totally serious.
How do we do that?
Oh, easy. You can go to our website, frozenchosen.org.
Frozenchosen.org.
Yeah, and there's ways to donate right there on the very front page of the website. And so yeah.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. Bernie has a question.
Yeah, quick question. Rabbi, did you go to LA campus of HEC?
Certainly did.
Yeah.
HEC LA. Yep. Right next to USC.
And I know that the students go to Juneau. They like that assignment. They intern. I get to talk to a lot of the students who have kind of questions about certain things, and it's a cool placement for sure. Yeah, they really like it. Thank you.
Any other questions? You can wave your hand if you have one. Let's see. Well, Leonard.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. There you
I
go.
was wondering if we could go back into the history a little bit, like when were the first congregations formed and so on, a little bit more of, what happened in ancient history.
Yeah, so I guess so in 1958, essentially a couple of Jewish people came together and said we need a congregation, and there's a lot of argument about whether to be a Reform or conservative congregation. And even now, even though we're affiliated with Reform, we're very much more conservative leaning than most of my Reform rabbi colleagues. And so that was one of the first arguments, is who to affiliate with. In the end, Reform won out, as Reform tends to win for isolated congregations. And then they started moving up, and they started having, I think religious school was a big factor there too. So as early as 1960, there was a religious school occurring. And then in 1988 is when we got our building, and we've since added like 3 additions to it since the building was founded then. And I would say that there's a big gold rush history that I don't know a lot about. Maybe Joe could get more into that, about how many people came into the gold rush and stayed back then, and like a lot of my own folks, a lot of people through the oil came and stayed. And that's the history of Anchorage. I know that Fairbanks has its own kind of unique history as well. I mean, they've been around for a while too. They don't have a full-time rabbi, but they do have someone that comes up every summer. And they've got a lot of guest rabbis who come through there that they get. So, and then Juneau has another congregation with a student rabbi, and they've been around for a while as well. And so it's Alaska, or Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Juneau have what I would call like the biggest ones. But there's certainly Jewish pockets throughout the whole state, which is why I end up traveling when I do, just so I can get to one place or another. And I know that, like, for example, the Kenai, which is sort of southeast of where I am, of Anchorage, they have their own community as well, and they're working hard on that one. So that's sort of a quick and dirty of like the different communities here in Alaska, with Anchorage by far being the oldest and longest.
As a lawyer and a politician, I can tend to view Alaska through that lens, but really Jewish businessmen were vital to the development of the state and to the congregation. The temple we occupy is on land donated by Barney Goodstein, who was the son of J.B. Goodstein, who was a grocer in the territory of Alaska and very successful. And we have Farrier, David Green, master farrier, who has generations of fur sales and fur fashion businesses in Alaska. So we have some prominent people in the private sector who have been very instrumental in building the community at large and the Jewish community here too. And sometimes we lawyers get smug and we don't remember all that and emphasize it enough, I think.
Okay. Someone said, I remember the Rabinowitz courthouse in Fairbanks. Who was Rabinowitz?
Well, Jay Rabinowitz, as I mentioned, was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Alaska. He'd been a Superior Court judge before that in Fairbanks. And truthfully, I think he would probably rank as one of the country's best judges. He's kind of our Cardozo, maybe, and he's remembered very at service. Did you hear me?
Sorry, Joe? Did I interrupt you?
No, I thought I was muted for a minute.
Okay. So are there viable year-round Jewish communities in other cities in Alaska? You had said Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Juneau.
Those are the three big ones. I don't know how to like define viable, but there's certainly other places where Jews meet. For example, I've talked to people in Kodiak Island, and there's a small Jewish community there. And so I would say, yeah, I mean, as Jews, we still tend to congregate towards the bigger cities, no matter where we are. Certainly those are the three places that I see Judaism happening on a weekly basis, essentially. But there's certainly plenty of Jews and kind of spread throughout the state who are practicing.
And we see visitors from the bases, the military posts, also come on Shabbos. And Rabbi, why don't you tell them about the brothers, which I think is really interesting.
Oh yeah, we have these three brothers who are originally from India, who apparently can trace some sort of Jewish ancestry even through in India, and they didn't realize that. That was really cool. Came to our congregation one day to see what that was like, and then stayed. I ended up converting them, and now they run our music program. And so these three Indian brothers are now very much devoted to our congregation and our Jewish community, and it's pretty exciting. And you can see them every Friday we now run services via live stream, which is at 7:30 at our time. And they do all the music with me. So they have all, and so if you ever want to come and see our live streams, you're welcome to.
So Rabbi, I know you mentioned you have to get going.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll just ask you two more questions if that's okay.
Sure.
So you mentioned oil. Based on Alaska's oil industry, the state was issuing generous checks annually to residents. Is this still ongoing?
Yeah. Call it the PFD, Permanent Fund Dividend. Permanent Dividend Fund, PFD. Yeah. We get money every year, and it ranges greatly from like less than 1,000 to 2,000. And maybe Joe can tell a little bit more about it. It's a very hot political debate about how much we get and whether we should get any at all. And so it's come to be there's a lot of now tension involved with it. Joe, you got anything else?
This is, a natural controversy. There are Alaskans who feel like I'm a shareholder. This was supposed to be in perpetuity. It helps me live in this expensive state, and I want my share of the oil wealth. And that's what I've voted for all these years, and I want that. There are others who say, we have other things to do with that money. Oil prices are down, tourism is down. We have schools to run, universities to fund, hospitals, healthcare, police, fire, municipal government. By the way, there's no sales tax in Anchorage. There's no sales tax in many places. And so we have to cut back on the permanent fund dividend. And the debate ranges, and it's just as emotional as you can imagine. Some people say that's breaking a promise. Other people say, no, this is the rainy day we've been saving for. We have to use that money for the rainy day. And it is a hot, hot issue. The legislature is today debating that. There are some people who want to give every Alaskan something like $3,000+ a year. Others would give us $1,400. Others, in the quiet solitude of their bedrooms, would say we really shouldn't do this at all. But it's a very current issue.
Does salmon still play a large source of income?
Yes, and one of the reasons for statehood was salmon, because the territorial government was dominated by lobbyists representing the canned salmon industry in Seattle, and was very resistant to local government and autonomy for Alaska. The salmon cause really led the way to bring about statehood.
Oh, Will is here. So maybe, here, let me welcome him. And then he can share his story. Would you like to introduce him real quick, Rabbi?
Yeah, Willie, where are you?
Let's find him. Oh, I see. I see him. I don't see his video. He might be connecting to audio right now. Let me see. Merge. Ask to start video. Oh, okay. I think he's. Oh, there you go, Will. I don't know if we can hear you. Here, I don't think we can. Are you able to unmute yourself? Let's see. Merge with audio.
Disconnecting now.
This should we?
Oh, okay. Let me unmute you. There we go.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Will.
There he is, right here.
Hi, Willie.
Hi, Willie.
Oh, hey.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just couldn't stand the idea of listening to Joe this morning, so I thought I'd check in late.
Anyway, yeah. Actually, ironically, Willie, I have to take off in a moment, so I'm just going to introduce you. And then, so the reason why I asked Willie to join us is because he's been a state representative, he's been a state senator, he's been a lieutenant governor for our state. And I think most importantly, he spent, I think, most of his life advocating for Alaska Native rights. And I personally think that he is a historian for the Alaska Native experience. And so I'm hoping, I really wanted you to hear from him so you can get an idea of that world in this, in Alaska. And Joe, you have anything you want to add?
Well, he's the author of a published book he should talk about too, which is about his life and growing up in Kotzebue and then going outside to school and coming back and being a young and now elder in the Native community. And he teaches at the University of Alaska as well. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Joe, for that.
Sorry, this is weird, but I gotta go to my next meeting now. So I'm gonna let Joe and Willie take it from here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Yeah, I really appreciate talking to you.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you. So, Will, we would love to hear your story.
Oh, well, thank you. Actually, I've had a wonderful time knowing Josephson. I've known him for, I don't know, half a century or more. And we were in the legislature together. And we've seen Alaska evolve from a, pretty mediocre economy with a little population of a couple 100,000 maybe at the beginning of statehood to now, which is we have 700 and some odd thousand people. So it's been a lot of change going on, and that change has been particularly true for people like myself and others who come from villages. We have about 200 villages. We have almost half the number of tribes that are in the lower 48. because every village pretty much is considered a tribe. And we've had lots of changes in our world. I mean, everybody has, but it's been extreme up here. We first of all, we've been around this part of the world for over 10,000 years, and we have many different cultures. I don't know if Joe talked about them, but in the Aleutian Islands, we have the Unangan people, who were the first to feel the effects of colonization by the Russians starting in the 1740s. And then we have the Yupik people in the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. They're maybe around 50 some odd villages in that area that are in that group. And then north of the Yukon, we have the Inupiat people, which is the people I come from. And the Inupiat pretty much go all the way from the northern part of Alaska to the Mackenzie Delta, over to the coasts of Hudson's Bay, also parts of Quebec and Labrador, and all the way to Greenland. So that's pretty much a single culture that really pretty much starts here in the North Pacific in Kodiak. The language is sort of comprehensible there. So we actually spread from the Pacific all the way to the Atlantic. And I like to say, if we had a couple hundred more years, we could have founded Europe. And needless to say, that that trek was done by foot, by dog team, by kayak. You know, our skin boats, umiaks and kayaks were our mode of transportation. They're covered with seal skin or walrus skin. And they were quite sturdy. They were light and sturdy. Then in the interior, the vast interior, are the Athabascan people, whose language is comprehensible with the Navajo, actually. And then in Southeast Alaska, we have the Tlingit, who were a highly stratified society. They were quite, they had powerful warriors. They had huge trading empires. And so those are the primary groups here in Alaska. Then you have the Sukpiat in Kodiak, which is where the Russians established their capital when they settled there back in the 1780s. Needless to say, the colonial period was pretty tough on people. We did actually get introduced to quite a number of diseases. Almost every ship carried some bug that our people couldn't deal with, and some of those epidemics started as early as the 1820s of all kinds: smallpox, chickenpox, measles, influenza. In my day, it was tuberculosis that was really rampant in the villages because we lived very close in small, tight houses. We had no, running water, clean water, that sort of thing. So anybody who got sick usually passed it on to someone, and almost all of us were affected by TB to some extent. And so the modernization didn't really begin to any extent till about the time Joe got here. I think, starting in the 50s and 60s with statehood. We weren't pushing statehood. Native people probably might have supported statehood, but what we didn't realize was that, and this was something that I kind of cut my teeth politically in when I first got involved in politics in my 20s. I did a research paper for Judge Rabinowitz, who was the youngest appointee to the Supreme Court by Governor Egan in the early days of statehood. He taught a course in constitutional law in Fairbanks, and I decided to research the issue of who owned Alaska. And I sort of came to the conclusion that we did, which was quite revolutionary at the time. The whole notion that we had any rights, because for over a century, they had never really researched the issue. And between 1867 and 1924, we essentially were not citizens of the United States, so we could not vote, we could not own property, we could not file for mining claims. And that little research paper really helped me to understand what was taking place in 1966, literally a century after the purchase, when the Statehood Act by Congress authorized the state to select over 100 million acres of native lands. We believe that they were our lands. And that really turned into a huge struggle between 1966 and 1971. And the net result of that was Congress did pass a bill that was signed by President Nixon in the end of 1971 in December. And oddly enough, Nixon is a hero to us because without his support, we could have never have gotten that land settlement, which included 44 million acres and almost $1 billion, which was unprecedented in American Indian history. And oddly enough, the people who colonized my hometown actually came from Whittier, California. They were Quakers who came there in 1897 in a kind of like a mini gold rush, and they established a church and a mission and a school there that opened in 1907. So the Quakers are, in fact, we are the only Quaker region in Alaska at this point. And so with that land settlement, it enabled us to, it was very unique because instead of the money going to the tribes and to be held in trust, it came to regional and village corporations that were authorized to be set up that were 100% owned by indigenous people. And that $1 billion became the capital from which we have built up our enterprises in Alaska. So rather than being just customers or visitors to the economic entities, we are now the owners of many, some of the most largest Alaskan-based companies. And it's still a little controversial even among our own people because we still have tribes, but in this instance, the land went to the regional corporations as opposed to the tribal entities. So it's not federal property or trust property like the reservations and the rancherias and whatnot. So that's sort of our history. It's been a huge struggle, but we created something new, and we were willing to sort of negotiate in order to get the land. But in reality, the land was something that we needed to continue our unique cultures. It just so happened that we, out of necessity, had to bend a bit in order to get the state on board and other interests. And so we sort of conceded to the corporate notion. Otherwise, we probably would never have been able to get that land that had been that had nurtured our people for literally thousands of years. Anyway, that's sort of our story. I don't know if Alaska told you, I mean, Joe told you, but we're in a real critical juncture right now. We've had about 40 fantastic years funded by oil and funded by federal largesse, and it's disappearing. I mean, oil just, the price of oil collapsed. Our throughput has gone from over 2 million barrels a day in the late 80s down to like 500,000 barrels or less now, probably, because they've had to cut the throughput. In any case, we've got some real challenges ahead. We have 500,000 more people than we did at the beginning of statehood. We pay no taxes to speak of, and we have had expectations by just being a warm body, you could get $1,000, $2,000 a year from the permanent fund, and that I think is going to go away, which is in a way sad because a lot of village people depend on that money to buy fuel for the winter, get food for the winter, etc. So we got some tough times ahead, no question about it.
So one question is, what is the relationship between Native Alaskans and the Jews in the last century?
In where?
So has there been a relationship between Native Alaskans and the Jews in the last century? It sounds like politically there has been, but so yeah, what is the relationship between Jews?
Actually, I mean, I think I'll tell you what, when I first ran for the legislature, when I was 24, I had 2 significant contributions for $500. One was from a businessman by the name of Larry Carr, who owned Carr's Groceries, which are now all over the place. And the other was from Barney Goodstein, who was his partner. Of course, Barney is a very, very successful businessman and a good friend. And in reality, besides Joe, I think he was the main 2 Jewish people that I knew. Although we've had traders from the Jewish community in my region, starting at the turn of the century, really, people who came from Europe, who saw an opportunity and who actually did quite well. I think it's been a very good relationship. In fact, one of my very good friends that just passed away, who was Lieutenant Governor, Byron Malott, was one of his first fundraisers was, in fact, at Barney Gottstein's home when Barney was still with us. It's become a closer relationship, I think. One of the things I regret, actually, was not accepting Barney's invite many, many years ago to visit Israel, because he saw, I think, some similarities between the kibbutzes and our villages. Our villages are, were very, very interrelated family-wise, and there's a tremendous amount of cooperation in our communities. We sort of survive by mutual help in our hunting practices. So I wished I'd made that trip. That was like, 40, 50 years ago, he made that invite.
I see. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. This was wonderful. And thank you so much, Will, for showing up and sharing your story as well. And Joe, I mean, this is just such a cool program, I just have to say, getting a window into Alaska. I mean, I don't know how many of you on here have known that much about Alaska and the Jewish connection. And I guess what I'm just trying to express is gratitude. I just think this is so cool. I'm very excited. So thank you, Joe and Will.
You're welcome.
This is the book.
And if anybody in your group comes to Anchorage, I hope you'll reach out to Virginia and me, and we'll happily show you around Anchorage.
Wonderful.
Yeah, this is the book Joe was referring to. It's called 50 Miles from Tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it gives our story, but my story, but in a sense, it's kind of like our story, because we're all sort of impacted by change, and you might find it interesting if you want to read a little bit more in depth about our experience up here.
There is one more question, if that's okay, and we'll conclude there. Mm-hmm. Leonard and Rebecca?
Yeah, I remember reading a while back, unfortunately I don't remember the name of the village, but there was a village on the shore there in, I guess, the Arctic Ocean, or whatever, that basically the land was disappearing, was washing away, and they had to move, or they were talking about having to move. Do you know what the rest of that story is?
Yeah, they've been continuing to find literally thousands and thousands of objects from maybe the 1600s. And I actually know Rick Knecht, the anthropologist who's been working with the village. I met him first in Kodiak, and then he did a lot of excavations out on Alaska. And now he's at Nunallik, I think is the name of the town or the village. So it's been a great discovery, because the items were so well preserved and gave a great picture of life, 500 years ago. And so Alaska is actually littered with communities, because we were scattered. In order to survive, we had to have a lot of space between us, because the land could only support so many people in terms of the game and the, and the resources. So when I was a kid, that was one of my greatest pleasures. We call it Navrach Nech, looking for Navrach. Navrach was artifacts. You just go down by the beach, and because of thousands of years, people living in the land, you just kind of, even if you're digging a post hole to tie a dog, you could find, an old tool. And it was just great to find these arrowheads and spearheads and slate knives and things made out of obsidian. Anyway, it's we've been up here a long time, so there's a lot of stuff there in the ground.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And before we leave, I just want to announce tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to Honolulu. Very exciting. It's going to be at, it's 2 p.m. California time, so 5 p.m. Florida time. So it's going to be an interesting lineup. We have Rabbi Ken Aronowitz of Temple Immanuel, which is the largest synagogue in all of Hawaii. We're going to hear from Larry. So we're going to learn about Elias Rosenberg, who played a significant role in the Jewish community there. I can't pronounce it. The Kalakaua scroll in Jews Coming to Hawaii. We're going to hear from Trudy about The Pursuit of Justice by Kurt Kashmir. We're going to hear from Moses, who is the father of surfing in Israel. And they'll get into talking about Jews who surf in Hawaii. And then Seymour is going to talk about Ukuleles for Peace, which is actually an organization based in Israel. It's where Palestinians and Jews come together playing the ukulele, and they go to different communities and play together. They had a big ukulele festival in Honolulu, and they invited them, and they really made a huge impact. And there's a board member at the synagogue in Honolulu. So that is what we're going to learn tomorrow. And then from there, we're going to conclude in Salt Lake City. So we will see you there tomorrow. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Rabbi, who's no longer here. It has been an honor, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. And let's thank the speakers. This was excellent. It really was.
Thank you.
Very special.
We have a daughter that goes to Temple Judea in LA.
Oh. Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Just that's FYI.
Really? Oh my gosh. Yeah, we know Temple Judea for sure. One of my coworkers, her brother is the cantor there. Or actually, no, that's Emmanuel. Sorry. But Emmanuel's. Anyway, thank you so much. And if I come to Anchorage, I'm definitely reaching out, Joe. So.
Please do. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Take care. See you tomorrow, everybody.
Bye-bye.